The old pickup truck crept slowly down the winding coastal road, its headlights dim to avoid drawing attention. Inside, 3 men sat in tense silence, their faces occasionally illuminated by the glow of a phone screen showing satellite images of an exclusive neighborhood in Carmel by the Sea, California. "That's it up ahead," whispered Lou, the oldest of the 3, pointing toward a turnoff half hidden by cypress trees. "Pull over here, Tony. We'll finish on foot." Tony, a stocky man with calloused hands who'd spent more time breaking into cars than driving them legally, eased the truck onto a gravelly shoulder about a quarter-mile from their target. The Pacific Ocean crashed against the cliffs below, the sound masking their movements as they gathered their equipment from the truck bed. "Run it back for me one more time," said Denny, the youngest and newest to their crew, nervousness evident in his voice despite his attempts to hide it. At 26, he had the technical know-how the older men lacked, but none of their experience in high-stakes robberies. Lou sighed, his breath forming a small cloud in the cool night air. "Like I told you, rich folks in this area are hardly ever home. They buy these multi-million-dollar places and visit maybe twice a year. The rest of the time they sit empty except for maybe a caretaker who checks in once a week." "And you're sure the owner's some old movie guy?" Tony asked, zipping up a black jacket and pulling a wool cap over his distinctive red hair. "Yeah, some director or producer or something. Gotta be in his 90s by now. The real estate blogs say he bought this place as an investment years ago, barely uses it." Lou had done his research, or so he thought. What he'd actually done was confuse several properties in his online searches, mixing up details about various celebrity homes in the area. The 3 men moved silently through the shadows, each carrying a backpack with tools of their illegal trade. They'd been planning this job for nearly a month, ever since Lou had overheard a conversation at a bar between 2 real estate agents bragging about the valuable art and collectibles in homes along this stretch of coastline. Denny pulled out his tablet as they approached the property's perimeter, activating an app he'd modified to detect wireless security signals. Older system than I expected. Good for us. Probably installed 10 years ago and never updated." "Rich people," Tony snorted. "They buy the best security money can buy, then forget all about it." They paused at the edge of the property, crouching behind a row of carefully trimmed shrubs. Before them stood a sprawling ranch-style home, its silhouette dark against the moonlit sky. Floor-to-ceiling windows faced the ocean, and a large patio extended from the back of the house, furnished with expensive outdoor furniture secured against the coastal winds. "Place this big, we could score big time," Lou whispered, binoculars trained on the house. "Artwork, electronics, jewelry, maybe even some cash if we're lucky. These old-timers don't trust banks like they should." What the 3 failed to notice was the discreet camera nestled in the branches above them, its tiny red light disabled but its motion sensor very much active. Nor did they spot the almost invisible tripwires running along the ground at ankle height, designed to blend perfectly with the natural surroundings. For the next hour, they observed the property, noting the lack of movement or lights. The home appeared to be exactly what they hoped for, an empty dwelling filled with valuables, its wealthy, elderly owner far away. "Time to move," Lou finally decided, checking his watch. It was just past midnight, the darkest part of the night before the moon would rise higher and flood the grounds with unwanted illumination. Denny went first, using his electronic equipment to identify and temporarily disable what he believed was the main security system. "We've got about 20 minutes before it auto-resets," he informed the others. "Should be plenty of time to get in, find the override panel, and shut it down completely." The 3 men moved across the manicured lawn with practiced stealth. Tony carried a small bag of tools for defeating locks and windows, while Lou had brought a specially lined duffel bag designed to block security tags on valuable items. "Rich people security is all for show," Tony muttered as he worked on a side door that appeared to lead to a mudroom or laundry area. "They want their friends to think they've got Fort Knox, but half the time they leave spare keys under potted plants." The lock clicked open with surprising ease, causing Tony to smile with professional pride. "And we're in, gentlemen." They entered the house, the beam of their narrow flashlights revealing a tastefully decorated interior. Nothing flashy or ostentatious, just quality furniture, some original artwork on the walls, and the kind of lived-in feel that spoke of money that didn't need to announce itself. "Spread out," Lou directed. "Denny, find the security panel. Tony, check the master bedroom for a safe or jewelry. I'll start in the office." As they dispersed, none of them noticed the subtle signs that would have warned more observant thieves. The coffee mug still warm in the kitchen sink, the book left open on an armchair, the faint smell of recently cooked food lingering in the air. Denny found the security panel exactly where he expected it to be, near the front entrance. What he didn't expect was how simple it appeared. No digital readout, no complex array of buttons, just a small green light indicating it was operational. "This can't be right," he murmured to himself, shining his light around the area, looking for a more sophisticated system. Finding none, he shrugged and used his electronic bypass tool anyway. The green light blinked once, then resumed its steady glow. Too easy, Denny thought, but he pushed aside his concerns, eager to prove his worth to the older thieves. Meanwhile, Tony had discovered the master bedroom and was thoroughly impressed. A king-sized bed faced those magnificent ocean view windows, and the furnishings spoke of understated luxury. He quickly located a walk-in closet and began searching for a wall safe. "Jackpot," he whispered, finding exactly what he expected behind a sliding panel of custom cabinetry. The safe was older, a manual combination model rather than a digital one. Tony smiled. He preferred the old-school safes. You could feel the mechanisms at work, hear the subtle clicks that told you when you were getting close. In the home office, Lou was having his own moment of discovery. The room was lined with bookshelves and movie memorabilia displayed in glass cases. Awards and framed photographs covered one wall, pictures of the home's owner with presidents, foreign dignitaries, and Hollywood royalty. Lou's flashlight beam stopped on one particular photograph and his blood ran cold. It showed a much younger version of the homeowner in a cowboy hat, squinting into the sun with that famous steely gaze, a gun belt slung low on his hips. "Oh no," Lou breathed, suddenly connecting the dots. No, no, no. He fumbled for his phone, quickly searching for information about Carmel by the Sea's most famous resident. The results confirmed his worst fear. They hadn't broken into some random wealthy producer's vacation home. They were standing in the primary residence of Clint Eastwood, actor, director, former mayor of this very town, and portrayer of cinema's toughest lawmen and outlaws. Lou's hand trembled as he texted his partners, "Get out now." But the message never sent. The signal inside the house had been cut the moment they entered, another security feature they'd failed to detect. As Lou turned to leave the office and warn the others in person, he heard a sound that made his skin crawl, the unmistakable, mechanical click of a light switch being flipped, the office flooded with light, temporarily blinding him. When his vision cleared, Lou found himself staring at an empty doorway. But somewhere in the house he heard a voice. That voice, gravelly, with age but unmistakable to anyone who'd ever watched a Western or a cop movie in the last 50 years. "I heard you boys were looking for me," the voice said calmly, echoing slightly as if coming through an intercom system. "Well, you found me." Lou stood frozen, the terrible realization washing over him. They'd made a critical mistake in their planning. They hadn't just picked the wrong house, they'd picked the worst possible house. And now, the consequences of that mistake were about to become painfully clear. In the kitchen, Denny was startled by the sound of a dog's nails clicking on hardwood floors, approaching from a darkened hallway. And in the master bedroom, Tony had just opened the safe to find it empty except for a single item, an old-fashioned sheriff's badge polished to a high shine. Their night of easy riches had just become a nightmare of epic proportions. Denny froze as the clicking of dog nails on hardwood grew louder. His flashlight beam danced nervously across the kitchen floor until it landed on a pair of paws. He slowly raised the light to reveal not the guard dog he feared, but a small, elderly Jack Russell Terrier who fixed him with a suspicious stare. "Hey there, little guy," Denny whispered, relief washing over him. "Just a harmless old dog." The terrier responded with a single sharp bark that echoed through the silent house. "Quiet, boy," Denny hissed. But the damage was done. From somewhere, deeper in the house came a voice, calm, measured with that unmistakable gravelly quality that had delivered some of cinema's most memorable lines. "Good dog, Scout. You found one of them." Denny's blood ran cold. The house wasn't empty after all. And that voice, he'd heard it countless times in movies his father had watched on Sunday afternoons. The realization of whose home they'd broken into hit him like a physical blow. Meanwhile, Tony stood motionless in the bedroom, the sheriff's badge gleaming in his trembling hand. The safe had been a trap, not to protect valuables but to send a message. He heard Lou's hurried footsteps approaching from the hallway. "We need to get out now," Lou whispered urgently when he reached the doorway. "This isn't some random rich guy's house, it's Clint Eastwood's," Tony finished, holding up the badge. "I figured that out." A soft chuckle from behind made both men spin around. There, leaning against the doorframe with remarkable ease for a man of his age, stood the Hollywood legend himself. Tall and lean, dressed simply in a casual shirt and pants, he regarded them with the same intense gaze that had intimidated audiences for decades. Despite being well into his 90s, he stood straight, his eyes sharp and alert. "Evening, gentlemen," Eastwood said, his voice surprisingly gentle yet commanding respect. "Looking for something specific, or just browsing?" Lou and Tony exchanged panicked glances. Running past him seemed impossible, not because the elderly actor could physically stop them, but because something in his demeanor rooted them to the spot. "Sir, Lou began, but words failed him. "Let me guess," Eastwood continued, crossing his arms. "You thought the house was empty, thought some rich old movie guy would be an easy target." In the kitchen, Denny was having his own standoff with Scout the terrier, who had positioned himself between Denny and the nearest exit, barking occasionally as if to remind everyone of his presence. "Could you call off your dog?" Denny called out, assuming Eastwood could hear him. "Scout's not stopping." "You," came the reply, carrying easily through the house. "Your own poor choices are what's stopping you. Why don't you join your friends in the bedroom? We should all have a talk." Denny hesitated, then slowly made his way through the house, guided by the sound of voices. When he entered the master bedroom, he found his partners standing awkwardly while Clint Eastwood leaned against the wall, looking oddly comfortable with the home invasion situation. "Now we're all here," Eastwood noted, glancing at each of them in turn. "Three men breaking into an old man's house in the middle of the night. I'm curious, what exactly did you expect to find?" "We didn't know it was your house, Mr. Eastwood," Lou said quickly, sensing that honesty might be their only hope. "We thought it was a vacation home that sat empty most of the year." Eastwood raised an eyebrow. "And that makes it okay?" "No, sir," Lou admitted, looking at the floor. Scout trotted into the room, circled Eastwood's feet once, then sat beside him, maintaining his vigilant watch of the intruders. "You know," Eastwood said conversationally, "in the old westerns I used to make, men who stole from others typically met with swift justice." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. "But this isn't a movie, is it?" The three thieves stood silently, waiting for whatever came next. None of them could have predicted what Eastwood did instead of threatening them. He walked over to a chair in the corner of the room and sat down, gesturing for them to sit on the edge of the bed. After a moment's hesitation, they complied. "I'm curious about something," Eastwood said, leaning forward slightly. "What drives three grown men to break into homes for a living? Surely there are better ways to make money." The unexpected question caught them off guard. They'd prepared for alarms, security guards, even police, but not for a philosophical conversation with Clint Eastwood. "The economy's tough," Tony offered weakly. Eastwood nodded thoughtfully. "It always has been for someone, somewhere. I grew up during the Depression, dug swimming pools by hand in the baking sun to make $1 a day, worked at a lumber company, hauling wood until my hands bled." He held up his hand, still strong despite his age. "Never once thought about taking what wasn't mine." The simple words carried more weight than any shouted threat could have. "How'd you know we were here?" Denny asked, curiosity temporarily overcoming his fear. "The security system looked ancient." A hint of amusement crossed Eastwood's face. Sometimes, the best security doesn't look like security at all. Old doesn't mean ineffective. He nodded toward the windows. Those motion sensors picked you up while you were still hiding in the bushes. The cameras tracked your movement across the property. And that panel you thought you disabled? He shook his head. It was a dummy. Lou looked up sharply. You knew we were coming before we even entered? I knew someone was coming, Eastwood corrected. Been noticing car lights pausing near my property the past few weeks? Too regular to be tourists looking for a glimpse of the house. Too cautious to be lost travelers. The three thieves exchanged glances, realizing their reconnaissance hadn't been as subtle as they'd thought. So why not call the police right away? Tony asked. Eastwood's expression turned serious. I've played both sides of the law in movies. Learned that sometimes a man deserves a chance to make a better choice before the law steps in. He studied them for a moment. Though I did alert them when you actually broke in, they'll be here soon. The sound of distant sirens confirmed his words, causing all three thieves to tense up. How much time do we have? Lou asked, already calculating paths of escape in his mind. Not enough to run, Eastwood replied evenly, but maybe enough to think about what you want to say to them when they arrive. Denny, the youngest, suddenly looked defeated. This is my third strike, he said quietly. I'm looking at serious time. Something in his tone caught Eastwood's attention. Third strike at what age? You can't be more than 30. 26, Denny admitted. Started boosting cars at 16. Spent more time in juvenile detention than in high school. Eastwood was silent for a moment, then stood up with a decision apparently made. Follow me, he said, walking toward the door with Scout at his heels. Confused but seeing no better option with the sirens growing louder, the three thieves followed him through the house to his office. Eastwood switched on a desk lamp and picked up a phone. Who are you calling? Lou asked nervously. An old friend, Eastwood replied, dialing from memory. Judge Williams. We worked together when I was mayor of Carmel. The thieves listened as Eastwood greeted the presumably awakened judge, explained the situation in brief terms, and then made a surprising request. I'd like to handle this differently, if you're willing to work with me. Yes, I understand they broke the law. No, nothing was taken. I have something else in mind. When he hung up, he turned to face the bewildered thieves. Here's what's going to happen, he said, his tone making it clear this wasn't a negotiation. The police will arrive. You'll be arrested. That part can't be avoided. But instead of pressing charges for felony breaking and entering, I'm going to request something different. The three waited, hardly daring to hope. Carmel needs work done. Beach cleanup, trail maintenance, community center repairs. Judge Williams will offer you a choice. Jail time or community service under my supervision. 1 year of honest work. His gaze hardened. And if you choose the work and then try to run, I promise I'll find you. I've hunted men across the desert and through the streets of San Francisco, at least on film. Don't make me do it in real life. The wail of sirens grew louder as police cars pulled into the driveway. Blue and red lights flashed through the windows, illuminating the room in pulses. Time to decide who you want to be tomorrow, Eastwood said quietly. Different men than you were today or just 3 more inmates. As the doorbell rang and Scout began barking excitedly, Lou, Tony, and Denny exchanged looks, realizing that, in the most unexpected way, breaking into Clint Eastwood's home might just be the best mistake they'd ever made. The local police station of Carmel by the Sea wasn't accustomed to much excitement, especially not in the middle of the night. But the arrival of 3 handcuffed men escorted by officers, followed by Clint Eastwood himself with his Jack Russell Terrier trotting at his heels, certainly qualified as unusual. Officer Garcia, who had been working the night desk, nearly dropped her coffee when the Hollywood legend walked in. Even after 30 years on the force, she still felt a flutter of excitement at seeing the town's most famous resident. Evening, Patricia. Eastwood nodded to her casually, as if bringing in home invaders was a regular occurrence. Mr. Eastwood, she replied, quickly regaining her professional composure. We've got the paperwork started on these 3. She eyed Lou, Tony, and Denny, who looked far less threatening under the fluorescent station lights than they had in the shadows of Eastwood's home. The booking process was handled efficiently, with fingerprints taken, mugshots snapped, and preliminary statements recorded. Throughout it all, Eastwood remained present, occasionally speaking quietly with Judge Williams, who had arrived, looking somewhat rumpled in hastily donned clothes, his white hair still mussed from sleep. Lou, the oldest of the three thieves, watched these interactions with growing curiosity. He'd been arrested before, but never had he seen a victim of a break-in stick around like this, especially not one who could simply make a phone call and have the full weight of the justice system crash down on them. After what seemed like hours of processing, the three men were led to a small conference room instead of the holding cells they'd expected. Judge Williams entered, followed by Eastwood and the police chief. "Gentlemen," the judge began, adjusting his glasses as he reviewed the paperwork before him. "The charges being considered are serious: breaking and entering, attempted burglary, criminal trespassing, all felonies that could result in substantial prison time, especially for those of you with prior convictions." Denny stared at his hands, his young face pale. Tony fidgeted nervously with the sleeve of his jacket, while Lou maintained a stoic expression, though his eyes betrayed his concern. "However," the judge continued, "Mr. Eastwood has made an unusual request that I'm inclined to consider, given his standing in this community and my respect for his judgment." The three thieves exchanged quick glances. "Here's what's on the table," Judge Williams said, removing his glasses. "Instead of pursuing maximum charges, Mr. Eastwood has proposed an alternative: 1 year of supervised community service, working on various projects throughout Carmel. You'll be required to check in daily, maintain steady employment for your basic needs, and dedicate weekends to these community projects. Any violation, any at all, and you'll face the original charges with my personal recommendation for maximum sentencing." The room fell silent as the three men processed this unexpected turn of events. "Why would you do this?" Tony finally asked, looking directly at Eastwood, genuine confusion in his voice. Eastwood, who had been standing quietly by the wall, his weathered face unreadable, took a moment before responding. "I've spent my life telling stories," he said, finally. "Played plenty of characters who made bad choices and some who found redemption." He shrugged slightly. "Maybe I'd like to see that happen in real life for once." "There's more," the police chief interjected. "You'll each need to wear ankle monitors for the first 3 months. You'll have curfews, and you'll meet weekly with both a probation officer and Mr. Eastwood himself to review your progress." "You're going to personally supervise us?" Lou asked, incredulously. "I've directed bigger casts," Eastwood replied with the hint of a smile. "Besides, this town gave me a chance when I became mayor years ago. Seems right to pass that chance along." The judge cleared his throat. "You have until morning to decide. Think carefully about your options." With that, the three men were led to separate holding cells for the night. Sleep came fitfully to Lou, his mind racing with the day's bizarre turn of events. Breaking into Clint Eastwood's home had been a terrible mistake, that much was obvious. But could it somehow lead to something positive? After decades of taking shortcuts, of choosing the easy but dishonest path, was he being offered a legitimate way out? In the cell next to his, Tony lay awake too, staring at the ceiling. At 42, he'd spent nearly half his life in and out of trouble. He'd told himself that society had dealt him a bad hand, that he was just evening the score by taking from those who had plenty. But Eastwood's words about digging pools for $1 a day during the Depression had struck a chord. Maybe his excuses were just that, excuses. Down the hall, Denny curled on his side on the narrow cell bunk. At 26, he was facing his third strike. California's laws meant he could be looking at 25 years to life. The thought made his stomach twist with dread. A year of hard work under the watchful eye of a Hollywood legend suddenly seemed like winning the lottery compared to that alternative. Morning came with harsh fluorescent lights and the smell of bad coffee. The three men were given a simple breakfast, before being brought back to the conference room where Judge Williams awaited them, looking more put together than he had the night before. "Have you made your decisions?" he asked without preamble. Lou spoke first. I'll take the offer, he said, his voice rough from a sleepless night. Me too, Tony added quickly. They both looked at Denny, who nodded. Yes, thank you for the chance. The judge made notes on the papers before him. Very well. I'll have the appropriate paperwork drawn up. You'll be released today into Mr. Eastwood's supervision program, which we're creating specifically for this situation. He fixed them with a stern look over his glasses. Don't make us regret this. As if on cue, the door opened and Eastwood entered, Scout at his heels as always. The small dog immediately began inspecting the room, sniffing at the thieves' shoes, with great interest. They've accepted, the judge informed him. Eastwood nodded, studying each man's face before speaking. First project starts tomorrow. Beach cleanup after the weekend crowds. 7 a.m. sharp at the main beach entrance. He turned to leave, then paused. One more thing. I've arranged temporary housing for you at the old groundskeeper's cottage, on the edge of town. It's not fancy, but it's better than jail. Don't make me regret that decision. With those words hanging in the air, he left, Scout trotting dutifully behind him. The following morning dawned clear and cool, typical for Carmel in early fall. Lou, Tony, and Denny arrived at the beach entrance at 6:45 a.m., each man wearing the ankle monitor that had been fitted the previous afternoon. They weren't sure what to expect. Would Eastwood actually show up? Or would he have sent some assistant to oversee them? Their question was answered moments later when a simple Jeep pulled into the parking lot, and Eastwood himself stepped out, dressed in work clothes, not unlike their own. Morning, he greeted them, handing each a pair of work gloves and a trash picker. Let's get started. For the next 4 hours, they worked alongside him, cleaning debris from the picturesque beach. Eastwood worked steadily, never asking them to do anything he wasn't doing himself. Occasionally, beachgoers would do double takes, smartphones emerging, to capture the unusual sight of the Hollywood icon picking up trash with 3 strangers. During a water break, Lou finally worked up the courage to ask the question that had been bothering him. I still don't understand why you're doing this. Why not just let them lock us up and be done with it? Eastwood took a sip from his water bottle, looking out at the ocean before answering. Everyone's got a story, he said finally. I've spent my life telling them, but the best ones are about people who change, who face a moment of truth and come out different on the other side. He turned to look at the 3 men. Maybe that's what last night was for you, a moment of truth. I'm just curious to see how the story ends. Tony shook his head in wonder. Most people would have just called the cops and been done with it. I'm not most people, Eastwood replied simply. And I've lived long enough to know that sometimes justice needs a human touch to be truly just. He put his water bottle away and picked up his trash picker. Break's over. We've got the north end to finish before lunch. As they resumed work, Denny found himself actually enjoying the labor, the simplicity of making something cleaner and better than he'd found it. For the first time in years, he felt something unfamiliar stirring inside him, a sense of purpose, of doing something worthwhile. Little did the 3 men know that this was just the beginning of a year that would challenge everything they thought. They knew about themselves, about second chances, and about an aging movie star who still had a few surprising scenes left to direct in the real world. 3 months into their year of community service, the 3 former thieves had settled into an unexpected rhythm. The small groundskeeper's cottage they shared on the edge of town had become something close to a home, the first stable living situation any of them had known in years. The cottage itself was humble but comfortable. 2 bedrooms. Lou had one to himself while Tony and Denny shared the other. A small living room with a fireplace that proved essential during Carmel's foggy evenings, and a kitchen where they took turns preparing meals. Outside, a small garden had begun to take shape under their care, something Eastwood had suggested during their second week. A man should grow something in his life, he'd told them, while dropping off packets of vegetable seeds. Teaches patience. Shows you that honest work produces honest results. On this particular Saturday morning, the 3 men gathered in the kitchen, preparing for their day's assignment. Their ankle monitors had been removed the previous week after 90 days of perfect compliance with the program's rules. What's on the schedule today? Denny asked, pouring coffee into 3 mismatched mugs. Lou checked the text message on the basic phone they'd been provided. Eastwood says to meet him at the community center at 8. Something about repairs to the roof. Tony groaned. Roof work in October? My back is still sore from rebuilding that stretch of trail last weekend. Better than jail, Lou reminded him, a phrase that had become something of a mantra among them. Yeah, Tony grumbled, but there was no real bitterness in his tone. They arrived at the community center 15 minutes early, a habit they'd developed after Eastwood had made them run beach stairs when they'd been 5 minutes late in the early days. The building was a charming but aging structure that served as a gathering place for local events, classes, and meetings. To their surprise, instead of finding Eastwood waiting for them, they were greeted by a middle-aged woman with kind eyes and practical clothes. You must be Lou, Tony, and Denny, she said, consulting a clipboard. I'm Rita, the center director. Clint said you'd be helping today. Where is he? Lou asked, looking around the parking lot for Eastwood's familiar Jeep. Had to go to Los Angeles for something film-related, Rita explained. Said to tell you he trusts you'll do the work right even without him watching. She looked up at them with a small smile. That's quite a vote of confidence from him. The three men exchanged glances, absorbing this new development. For the first time since their unusual arrangement began, they would be working without Eastwood's direct supervision. Well, Lou said finally, let's see what needs fixing. The roof work was challenging, replacing damaged shingles, sealing, leaks, cleaning gutters clogged with pine needles and leaves. By midday, they were sweaty, dirty, and had made significant progress. During their lunch break, sitting on the edge of the roof with sandwiches Rita had provided, Denny looked thoughtfully at the town spread out below them. You know what's weird? He said between bites. I don't hate this, Tony snorted. What, eating tuna sandwiches on a roof in the middle of nowhere? No, Denny replied seriously. This life, working with my hands, seeing something improved because of what I did. He gestured toward the portion of roof they'd already repaired. That'll keep the rain out this winter. People will stay dry because of us. It's different. Lou nodded slowly. Used to be we only thought about what we could take. Now we're leaving things better than we found them. Getting philosophical in your old age, Lou? Tony teased, but his expression suggested the words had resonated. When they finished for the day, Rita inspected their work with an approving eye. Excellent job. The center hasn't had proper roof maintenance in years. She hesitated, then added, We're having a community dinner here tomorrow night. You three should come. The invitation caught them off guard. Besides Eastwood and the officials overseeing their case, they'd had minimal interaction with the townspeople, most of whom knew only that they were Eastwood's project, as some had taken to calling them. I don't know if that's allowed, Lou said uncertainly. Rita smiled. I already checked with Judge Williams. He said it would be good for you to get more integrated with the community you're serving. After she left, they debated whether to attend. Might be uncomfortable, Tony argued. People staring, wondering what we did. Or it might be nice to have a meal we don't have to cook ourselves, Denny countered. Lou, as usual, had the final word. Eastwood left us unsupervised today. That means something. I say we go to the dinner, be respectful, and show him his trust wasn't misplaced. The community dinner was nothing fancy. A potluck with long tables set up in the main room of the center, children running between chairs, and the relaxed chatter of neighbors catching up. The three men arrived feeling out of place, carrying a store-bought apple pie as their contribution. Initially, there were curious glances, a few whispers, but Rita welcomed them warmly, introducing them simply as the team who fixed our roof, making no mention of their unusual circumstances. An elderly man approached their table during the meal, setting down his plate across from them. You fellows did good work up there, he said, nodding toward the ceiling. Been worried about leaks ruining our new floor for months. Thank you, sir, Lou replied, surprised by the compliment. Call me Frank. Sir was my father. The old man squinted at them. You're the ones working with Clint, aren't you? Part of his rehabilitation program. The three tensed, waiting for judgment. Frank chuckled at their expressions. Relax, boys. This town's seen plenty of people get second chances. Clint himself gave me one back in '86 when he was mayor. I was the town drunk then. He patted his water glass. 38 years sober now, thanks to him believing I could be more than my worst mistakes. Throughout the evening, other townspeople stopped by their table. Some were merely curious, others genuinely friendly. A retired contractor offered Tony a part-time job helping with local renovations. A woman who ran the town's small bookstore mentioned needing someone for morning shifts, looking pointedly at Denny when she said it. By the time they walked back to their cottage under a star-filled sky, something had shifted in their perspective. "Did you notice?" Denny said as they approached their home. "No one treated us like criminals." "Because they don't know what we did," Tony replied, but without conviction. "No," Lou said thoughtfully. "I think it's because Eastwood vouching for us means something here. These people trust his judgment." The next morning, they received a text to meet Eastwood at his home, a request that sent an uncomfortable ripple of memory through them. The last time they'd been there, they'd been breaking, in not arriving as invited guests. Eastwood greeted them at the door, Scout circling excitedly around their legs. The house looked different in daylight, less mysterious, more simply a well-loved home with comfortable furniture and personal touches. "Come in," he said, leading them to the kitchen where coffee was brewing. "Rita tells me you did good work. On the roof. No supervision needed." "We're not planning to run if that's what you're checking," Tony said, a defensive edge to his voice. Eastwood poured 4 mugs of coffee before responding. "If I thought you'd run, I wouldn't have left." He pushed the mugs toward them. "Heard you went to the community dinner too." "Hope that was okay," Lou said. More than okay, it was the point. Eastwood sat at the table, indicating they should join him. "This program isn't just about punishment or making amends. It's about reconnection." "Reconnection to what?" Denny asked. "To community. To purpose." Eastwood's weathered hands cradled his mug. "To the better version of yourselves that got lost somewhere along the way." They sat in silence for a moment, absorbing his words. "I've been thinking," Eastwood continued. "You've proven you can work without me looking over your shoulders. Time to take the next step." He pulled 3 envelopes from his pocket and slid them across the table. "What's this?" Lou asked, picking up one cautiously. "Job offers. Real ones with fair pay. The bookstore needs help. That's for you, Denny. You mentioned liking to read once. Tony, Frank needs a permanent assistant for his contracting business. And Lou, the city has an opening for a maintenance worker at the park." The 3 men stared at the envelopes in disbelief. "These aren't part of our community service?" Tony asked. "No. These are jobs. You'll still do your weekend service hours, but it's time you started building lives that can continue after your year with me ends." Lou shook his head slowly. "Why are you doing all this? We broke into your house. Most people would want us locked, up and forgotten." Eastwood took a thoughtful sip of his coffee before answering. "When you've lived as long as I have, you learn that most people aren't all good or all bad. They're just people who made choices, some good, some terrible." His gaze swept across the 3 of them. "I'm giving you the chance to make better ones." As they left Eastwood's home that day, walking out the front door rather than sneaking in through a side entrance as they had months before, Lou paused to look back at the house that had changed the course of their lives. "You know," he said, quietly to the others, "breaking in here was the biggest mistake we ever made, and somehow also the luckiest thing that ever happened to us." Denny nodded, clutching his job offer letter. "Who would have thought getting caught would be the best thing for us?" Tony smiled slightly. "Guess sometimes you have to hit rock bottom to start climbing up." As they walked down the driveway, they could see Eastwood watching from the window. Scout perched beside him, the unlikely director of their unexpected second act. 1 year to the day after they had broken into his home, Lou, Tony, and Denny stood in Clint Eastwood's living room once, again. This time they entered through the front door as invited guests. The room was filled with a small gathering of people who had become important in their lives over the past 12 months. Judge Williams, Officer Garcia, Rita from the community center, Frank the contractor, and several other Carmel residents, who had played roles in their unexpected journey. Scout, now moving a bit more slowly with age, still circled the room with enthusiasm, accepting treats from guests who had learned to come prepared for the terrier's sweet tooth. "Hard to believe it's been a year," Denny said quietly to Lou as they stood by the fireplace, each holding a glass of sparkling cider. At 27, Denny looked remarkably different from the nervous young thief who had broken into this house. His posture was straighter, his eyes clearer, and he carried himself with a quiet confidence that came from 12 months of honest work and kept promises. "Sometimes feels like a lifetime ago," Lou replied. At 55, the lines in his face told stories of hard years, but the bitterness that had once dominated his expression had softened. "Other times I still wake up surprised not to be in a cell." Their year of community service had officially ended that morning with a brief ceremony at the courthouse. Judge Williams had formally released them from their obligations, declaring, "Their debt to society paid in full." The gathering at Eastwood's home wasn't an official event, but rather his personal way of marking the milestone. He moved through the room now, speaking briefly with each guest, that distinctive gravelly voice occasionally rising above the general conversation. Tony joined Lou and Denny by the fireplace, his eyes taking in the room with a sense of wonder. "Remember when we thought this place would be an easy score?" he asked with a soft laugh. "Biggest miscalculation of our lives." "Best miscalculation," Denny corrected him. Eastwood approached them then, that familiar intense gaze taking in each man in turn. "How does freedom feel?" he asked. The three exchanged glances. It was Lou who finally answered. "Strange, actually. We've gotten used to having a structure, rules to follow." Eastwood nodded as if he'd expected this response. "That's why I wanted to talk to you three privately before the party wraps up. Follow me." He led them through the house to his office, the same room where Lou had first realized whose home they had broken into. The space looked different in daylight, less intimidating but no less impressive, with its walls of awards and memorabilia from a legendary career. Eastwood settled into the chair behind his desk, gesturing for them to take seats opposite him. "Your community service is complete," he began, "but I suspect you're wondering what comes next." "We've been talking about that," Tony admitted. "I've been saving from my work with Frank, thinking of staying in Carmel, maybe renting a small place. The bookstore owner wants to keep me on," Denny added. "Says I have a good eye for recommending books to customers." Lou nodded. "Parks Department offered me a full-time position. Seems I have a way with the gardens." A hint of satisfaction crossed Eastwood's face. "Good. I was hoping you'd all decide to stay." He opened a desk drawer and removed a folder. "Which brings me to my proposition." The three men leaned forward, curious. "The groundskeeper's cottage you've been living in?" "I own it," Eastwood explained. "It sits on the edge of my property technically. Been in my family for years." This was news to them. They'd assumed the cottage belonged to the town. "I'm offering you a lease," Eastwood continued, opening the folder to reveal a document. $1 per year, renewable annually, with 3 conditions. "What conditions?" Lou asked cautiously. "First, you maintain the property as well as you have this past year. Second, you continue working your honest jobs. And third—" Eastwood paused, his expression serious. "Once a month you visit schools or youth centers in the county to talk about choices and consequences, share your story, maybe keep some other young person from making the mistakes you did." The three former thieves sat in stunned silence. "Why would you do this for us?" Denny finally asked, the question that had been asked repeatedly throughout their year of rehabilitation. Eastwood leaned back in his chair, considering his answer carefully. "In my films, I've played plenty of men who believed in black and white justice. Eye for an eye. No second chances." He gestured toward the movie, posters on his wall. "But real life is more complicated than that. Sometimes people just need the right opportunity to become who they could have been all along." He pushed the lease toward them. "Besides, I've gotten used to having you around. Scout has too." As if on cue, the little dog trotted into the office and jumped onto Eastwood's lap, eyeing the three men with what almost looked like affection. Back in the living room, the party continued. Judge Williams was deep in conversation with Rita about funding for community center programs when the four men returned. "Everything okay?" the judge asked, noting their emotional expressions. "Just finalizing some paperwork," Eastwood replied, casually, though his eyes held a hint of satisfaction. Later, as guests began to depart, Officer Garcia approached the three former thieves. "You know," she said with a small smile, "when I processed your arrest that night, I never would have predicted this outcome." "That makes four of us," Tony replied. "The department's doing a community outreach program next month," she continued, "teaching kids about making good choices. We could use some real-life examples of how wrong turns can be corrected." Lou nodded. "We'll be there." As the last guests left, Eastwood stood in the doorway with the three men, looking out at the sunset over Carmel Bay. "1 year ago tonight, you came here thinking you'd found an easy target," he said quietly. "An old man's empty vacation home." "Biggest mistake of our lives," Lou acknowledged. "Or maybe not," Eastwood replied. "Depends on how you look at it." The next morning dawned clear and bright. For the first time in a year, Lou, Tony, and Denny woke up with no community service obligation, no mandated check-in, no supervisory oversight. Yet instead of sleeping in, they were up early, drawn by the habits formed over 12 months of structured days. They gathered in the kitchen of the cottage, their cottage now, at least for the coming year. "Feels weird not having to report anywhere," Denny remarked, pouring coffee. "Actually," Tony said, checking his phone, "I got a text from Frank. There's a roof repair job he wants my help with." "And I promised Rita I'd fix that leaky pipe in the community center bathroom," Lou added. Denny smiled. "Book delivery coming to the store today. The owner needs help reorganizing the mystery section afterward." They looked at each other, the realization dawning simultaneously. Their lives had changed so fundamentally that even without obligations, they now chose responsibility. After breakfast, they stepped outside to find Eastwood's Jeep pulling up. He rolled down the window, Scout's head popping out beside him. "Thought you might want to join me," he said. "Town's planting new trees in the park today. Could use some experienced hands." Though they had legitimate reasons to decline, jobs to get to, commitments to keep, none of them hesitated. "We can spare an hour," Lou decided, the others nodding in agreement. As they climbed into the Jeep, Eastwood gave them an appraising look. "You know, you're not obligated anymore. Your debt is paid." "Some debts can never fully be paid," Lou replied, simply. "But we can keep trying." Eastwood nodded, a rare full smile crossing his weathered face as he put the Jeep in gear. "That's the thing about redemption," he said as they drove toward town. "It's never really finished. It's a path you keep walking, one day at a time." The Jeep rounded a bend in the road, revealing Carmel spread out below them, the Pacific Ocean glittering beyond. In the growing light of morning, the town looked full of possibility. A year ago, 3 thieves had come to this coastal community looking for an easy score, and found instead the hardest challenge of their lives, becoming the men they could have been all along, and an aging Hollywood legend who had spent decades playing tough characters who stood for justice, had found perhaps his most satisfying role yet, not on the silver screen but in real life, proving that sometimes the most powerful force for change isn't punishment, but opportunity. As the Jeep descended toward town, Scout barked happily from the front seat as if announcing their arrival. But it wasn't an arrival, really. For Lou, Tony, and Denny, it was just another step on a continuing journey, one that had begun with a terrible mistake and led, against all odds, to a second chance none of them had ever expected to deserve. Sometimes, as Eastwood had told them, more than once during their year together, the most important turns in our stories are the ones we never see coming.